Well, we are continuing with the conversation in this second panel. Many of the points that are going to be developed, hopefully, in this second panel have been mentioned, pointed out in the previous panel, but I think that was not at all a problem. Very much on the contrary, it was preparing the stage for this second roundtable, which is entitled Trust in Science Under Pressure in an Era of Controversy and Disruptive Technological Change. So you can recognize there some of the issues that were previously discussed. And as earlier, we will start with a keynote speaker, which in this occasion will not be present here with us, but connected online. And she will be Dame Wendy Hall, Professor of Computer Science, Associate Vice President, and Director of the Web Science Institute at the University of Southampton. So Dame will be addressing us for about 10 minutes. And after that, I will come back here to call the rest of the participants in the roundtable. So Dame, I hope you can hear us and that you are ready.
It's not Dame. If you're going, it's the Dame or Wendy, right?
Okay. So Wendy probably.
Right. It's my title.
Thank you so much for being with us, and then the floor is yours for around 10 minutes. Thank you.
Okay. So thank you very much. Thank you for letting me join online. It was very hard for me to get there in person today. But I'm sorry, I mean, who turns down a trip to Paris? But I have, so here we are, I'm online. And of course, I don't know what the first panel said, so I'm just going to have to say the things I wanted to say. And my, if you don't know who I am, then I am, yes, a Regis Professor in Computer Science at the University of Southampton. I've been in computer science for 40 years. I wrote my first AI code 40 years ago. But more recently, I wrote the UK's a review of AI for the UK in 2017 for Theresa May's government. Out of that came the UK's national strategy and the Office for AI and an AI Council, and that's all things have evolved since then. And more recently, I was on the United Nations High-Level Advisory Board for AI, and we came up with recommendations in September 24 for global governance of AI, which were accepted by the General Assembly, and they're now implementing them. But it's a tortuous path, and I just wanted to tell you some stories, I suppose, along the way, because, you know, you have to earn trust, and we are scientists. Trust in science is a very complicated issue, and it's. I'm going to focus on AI because that's where my attention is at the moment, and that's what I'm most knowledgeable about. I am a scientist, of course, by training, but I'm going to focus on AI as a potential. You know, the developments in AI are going to give rise to tremendous breakthroughs in science. And particularly in health, but also in education and all the big challenges we have, the food security, water security, climate change, energy supply. These are things we can apply AI to help us sort out these issues. Of course, the joke about AI and climate change is you ask an AI how the best way to solve the climate change issues, and the answer is kill all the human beings. That's probably not what we want the AI to propose to us as the best way forward. But in fact, it's what the ChatGPT guy said was going to happen. And so it's a very, very confusing world for people who don't understand what AI is. And first of all, it's what type of AI are we talking about? You know, as I said, I wrote my first code, prologue code, to design an intelligent tutoring system on a BBC Micro back in 1984. I mean, obviously, it was just not even a proof of concept. It was just, showing what the idea of what an intelligent tutoring system might be. But we couldn't do anything. We had no compute power. We had no data. We didn't have neural networks. In those days, it was all decision trees and maybe the beginnings of expert systems and vision and some natural language processing. Anyway, but today, if you say, and I go on the media a lot, and they talk about AI, and they usually mean generative AI, large language models, the stuff that's coming out of Silicon Valley and the south coast of China at the moment, which has caused such disruption, havoc, excitement, and at the same time, ideas about catastrophe, because everything. There was the Chat GPT moment, as we call it, November 22, when OpenAI and Sam Altman released what they called Chat GPT, which was a very easy to use interface to a very complex AI system, which is generative AI is all about predictive statistical analysis of huge amounts of data. It's going to change, that technology is going to change our world profoundly, particularly the world of scientists. But the OpenAI at the time, the press release was, this is amazing technology, play with it. It is going to change your world, but it could also be the end of the human race. Right? They were saying both these things at the same time. So how were people to understand whether they trusted them or not? And actually, when you think about it from their point of view, it's all about taking a leap, getting ahead of the game in terms of market share and the commercial drive to get this technology out. And I don't know whether Sam Altman will go down as hero or villain in the history of this piece, because that technology was not ready to be released, really. Certainly, it was ready to be experimented with and tried and tested by all sorts of people and to be talked about. And of course, he captured the public's attention. But then everyone, I had so many people asking me, because I was on the radio and TV a lot about it, and people asking me, are my children safe? Well, that's one question. But are we going to be alive next year? Is AI going to kill us? And so, they said, Sam Altman stood up in 2023 and said, by 2025, we will have developed AGI, advanced general intelligence, that will be more intelligent than any human being, and potentially, if that is the end of the human race, but the end of the human race. But we're saying this in a world that's completely AI is not regulated, like the technology industry is not regulated. We don't tolerate that with any other industry. If you think about aviation, anything to do with transport, food, energy, imagine if electricity wasn't regulated, or drugs, any of the things that are global either infrastructure or product delivery project markets. They're regulated. We regulate our banks, how they deal with our money. All these things that can do us lots of harm, we regulate. People are just beginning to think about something we should have thought about years ago, which is regulating social media. And we're watching the Australian experiment very carefully. And I was part of the world that wanted everyone to use the World Wide Web. And back in the 1990s, when we were talking about that, we didn't really think about the harms that social media was going to do, because we didn't understand them. It was like this big world experiment, and look where we've ended up. And now we're doing that again with AI in a completely unregulated space. And, the story, I've probably already spoken for 10 minutes. Can someone tell me how much time I've got left? Probably I shouldn't go on for too much longer, but the the industry say we will self-regulate. And of course, we have currently the leader of the free world, the President of the United States, saying there will be no regulation of AI anywhere in the United States. It's all market forces. We're going to win this race with China. Interestingly, of course, China just this year pivoted almost totally to it's now talking about everything they do being open and transparent, regulation, supporting the United Nations recommendations on global policy, dialogues, and looking at the science from a global perspective to try and make the best use of AI for the good of humanity, but mitigate against the rest. This is China talking, not the US. And then you've got Europe sort of in the middle of all that, trying to push its AI regulation, which is very bureaucratic, very riling, trying to find the tech companies, and they're having to pull back. They're being pushed back on the regulation because maybe it went too far too fast. You've got to. I agree with the point of view of putting human rights first. But there's a very difficult geopolitical world out there. And actually, apart from a few small exceptions, I would say, Mistral in France and some of the big startups we have in the UK and others around in Europe, all the big play is in the US and China. And then, of course, you've got people using AI, particularly because there's a lot of open AI, there's a lot of open source AI. Any rogue state or big worldwide criminal organization can use it to attack us, do us harm. And we've also got the issue of AI in warfare. And in all of this, how can we expect the public to trust what we're doing when the companies themselves are so schizophrenic about how they sell their product? I wouldn't say Google. Actually, my bet's always been on Google. They're much more careful about what they say. But there are, the open AIs of this world are about this amazing technology. You've got to, they're not in profit. We're going through the AI crash at the moment as the company's stock value falls and the value of NVIDIA is falling, all that. But we've got this wonderful technology, and you've all got to buy it and use it, even though it will tell you things that aren't wrong. I mean, this is the point I want to finish on, is that I'll finish with this example. The many years we've had lots of trials and tests and evaluation of the use of AI, not generative AI, but good old-fashioned image processing, in terms of looking at cancer scans of the cancer scans and particularly mammography. Lots of examples proving that those AI systems are more accurate and more efficient than human beings. Now, we're in a world where everyone's talking about AI replacing their jobs, but we haven't seen the end of the radiographer. And that's because there's two reasons for that. One is, can we still trust the AI? Don't we need human beings in that loop to make sure that what's being produced and what the patients are being told is correct, as far as the human being is concerned, and as far as the experts are concerned? And secondly, because actually we have health and safety built into those industries. There are processes to go through before we accept that AI can replace human beings in any shape, sense, or form in that world. Then alongside that, we're being told that generative AI is going to take all our jobs in the workforce, and everyone gets very scared about that. It just isn't going to be the case. It's not going to be like that. That's all marketing from the companies. So how do we translate all this that's going on into a world where the public can trust what we scientists do? I think I'll finish there. I've probably had my 10 minutes, have I? Anybody there? Can you hear me?
Thank you very much, Wendy. That was exactly 10 minutes, more or less.
Oh, was it?
Thank you. Thank you very much for that insightful introduction. Specifically on AI, one of the most important dimensions we'll be addressing when talking about disruptive technological change that is affecting us and trust in science in particular. So now I would like to call the rest of the participants of this table to join me, starting by Agnès Busson, President of Evidences and former Minister of Solidarity and Health in France. Thank you so much, Agnès. We'll be joined also by Romain Houret, President and Director of Studies at the École des Hautes Études en Sciences Sociales here in Paris. Romain. And finally, also by Rebecca Vates, Head of Research Integrity at the UK Research and Innovation Network. Wendy is going to stay with us, I suppose, in the back, also participating, not in this first round of interventions, but obviously definitely on the conversation and on the answering questions that will follow immediately after. So in order to organize this panel, we gave the participants some very broad, very general questions that basically ask them about their perceptions and opinions about how technological change is affecting trust in science, complementing what Wendy has just expressed to us. So I will just give them the word now one by one, starting by Agnès, and then following by Romain, and then Rebecca. For this first intervention, I will then guide the conversation a little bit before opening the floor for the rest of the participants here. So Agnès, whenever you want.
Thank you very much, Francisco, and very nice meeting all of you for this panel, because it's such an important issue. What is strange to me is when you look at surveys, for example, there was a survey published in Nature Human Behavior few months ago about trust in science. And looking at the results, it says that 80% of the population trust in science. So that sounds good. The problem is when you want to get deeper and ask other questions about integrity, for example. So many people trust in the method of science, the results of science, but they doubt about integrity of scientists. And only, for example, in France, only 56% of the population think that scientists are honest. They think they have link of interest. So that means that the trust in science is something, but trusting really the results, it's not so obvious. Another thing which is really frightening is what people put behind the word science. For example, more than 50% of young people in France think that astrology is science. So it becomes very difficult to understand what people trust in. And I would like to come back to health. Of course, I used to be Minister of Health during COVID, and I had to face something incredible, the shame of the French science, which was Didier Raoult and hydroxychloroquine. You all know about this drug that people trust that would cure COVID. And in fact, this man was a very well-known scientist. So when people trust in science, they can trust also very word scientists. And that means that people don't understand what is really an expert and how we peer review, how our method are dealing with truth and trying to give facts. So this is an issue really for us, because people want to trust in science, they want to trust in progress. They hope that progress will deal with our climate change, with medical issues. Of course, they want to trust. But in fact, they don't know where is the truth. They have a problem to distinguish truth and false information. And this is our task now, to help people to repair them, to find their path between so many informations. And I think one of the main issues for our countries is education. I think we did not insist enough on scientific methods, on building awareness of how you get to the truth. It doesn't come from the sky. It's building information in science takes time. They don't understand the difference between a debate between experts and a debate on social media or on TV. And so we have a very, very big role in educating young people to understand how science works. I would stop with that. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Roman, whenever you want. I hope it works. Yes, probably they will activate it for us.
Yes. It doesn't work anymore. It works. I'm not sure. Thank you for the nice introduction. And I'm in a curious position because I am both a president of a French institution which revolves around the social sciences, and I'm also an historian of the United States. So what I will try to do today is to tell you something about my two different positions. First, I will start with me being a historian of the United States, and what we live today and here and in the US is, for the historian I am, is could be seen as something very usual. I mean, we can start with that and just saying that's business as usual. Just to give you an example, to tell you more about it, in 1955, a very, very famous US historian named Richard Hofstadter published a great book called The Tradition of Anti-Intellectualism in the United States. And his argument is very interesting for today's world. He argues that there was, over the last 200 centuries, a fight between science and other central institutions in society, churches, family, and it was a very, very long fight between the two. And in the early 20th century, science was able to win this fight between the two, but you still have an anti-intellectual forces in the society. And Hofstadter's argument was that those forces were going to disappear because of the increasing number of universities after World War II and the triumph of liberal values in the United States. To some extent, he failed. His view was, to some extent, wrong, and I will try to tell you more about it. First, he was right, Hofstadter, because after World War II, what we saw in the United States and in most countries in the world was the triumph of science and expertise. It was a kind of golden age, the times after World War II, and everywhere science was given an exceptional place in societies. Scientists were very famous, they were always on television, everywhere. I mean, all the major institutions gave a lot of money to science, to projects of big science, and the United States were a very interesting place. After World War II, the National Science Foundation gave a lot of money to all major institutions. You have an exceptional increase in the number of students on campuses. And so you have an incredible golden age. And to understand what's going on today, we have to go back to World War II and the triumph of science. Something happened in the 1960s, 1970s. And what happened was what's a US historian called a chain reaction process. This high level of science and expertise gave way to a chain reaction process. Because you have experts, because you have great scientists, you have inside the population, inside the civic society, you have a moment for counter-expertise. And you have, in many places, in many associations, grassroots associations, people who believe to say, maybe scientists are wrong. And they were not people on the right, they were people on the left. And on very important issues as environment, nuclear policy, you have a lot of grassroots organizations and associations which started to ask an important questions: are scientists right? And it was the first attack and the first moment of distrust. The second was something very strong coming from the right in the US. And we are now in this Trump age. We are in very, I'm able to say that what happened, what started in the 1960s, this high level of attacks against scientists and against universities, which were to some extent invisible in the 60s and 70s, today is highly visible, and the Trump's attacks against universities and major Ivy League universities came from that second moment of attacks. And what was the attack? The attack was exactly what Hofstadter believed was going to disappear. You have attacks from people who believe that the family, corporations, other places are the key places to tell people about science, not universities, not scholars. And so that's the second attack. So to some extent, we see today the victory of these two attacks against scientists. And we are, and as Agnès just mentioned, we are through a higher level of distrust because these two different sets of attacks came to a very strong position in the public sphere. What makes things worse is the huge transition from the public sphere of the post-World War II era, the public sphere which was part of the Enlightenment tradition. Today, all this is to some extent over. We are not in the same public sphere. And the huge transformation of the public sphere was caused by social networks. And we live in a different place. And it has major consequence for science. We see now a transfer of the places of knowledge production. Today, universities are not the only places where you have this high number of students, of scholars, of scientists publishing works and telling people about science. You just have to go on Twitter or other social networks to see a lot of people without the traditional curriculum and training who are not able to tell about health, public policy, environment, climate change. And they are more popular than I am, and maybe that you are. I mean, they have a lot of people following them and believe exactly what they say on these social networks. So that's the last reason why we have this strong attack against science and the trust in science. Just to be more optimistic, but to be honest, I'm not very much optimistic about the possibility of universities to keep the same position, the same place, the same hegemonic place in the 21st century. I mean, we are under attack, a very strong, very powerful attack. So what can we do? I will just do in 1 minute. First, there is a need for more participation of citizens into the production of science. That's the left, to go very, very, very fast. That's the left proposal. I mean, we need to cooperate with citizens, on issue of environment, nuclear policy, health, and other. There is a strong call for more participation, more scientists able to participate. I mean, to ask for citizens as part of the construction of knowledge. The second, and I agree with what Agnès Buzyn just said, we need to find ways to teach more about the rule of science. And I'm not sure that Didier Raoult was a problem. I mean, he has the right to some extent to give a proposal. I mean, why not? I mean, that's part of the scientific process. The problem is that most people did not understand that it was his proposal needed to be confirmed by other scientists. That's the rule of science. Okay, that's the rule of controversies. That's controversies and radical proposals are part of the rule of science. But we have rules. We have ways of giving credit or not to Didier Raoult's proposal. So the problem is not what he said. The problem is that so many people believe him and still believe he was right. I mean, in France and in other countries, that's what should really scare us. The last element is, how do we cooperate with other places of knowledge production? social networks, corporations, the big tech, the data issues, they are central, crucial. We need to find ways for universities to cooperate, to work with them. Otherwise, we are going to be in a very, very difficult position with knowledge productions which is created in other places than in universities. So that's maybe the main challenge we have to face all together. Sorry for being not optimistic, but to be honest, as the president of social sciences institutions, I am not very optimistic. Thank you.
Can you hear me okay? Yes. Yeah, okay. First of all, I just wanted to say thank you to all of you for coming and engaging. I was really excited about this conference, so much so that they told me yesterday I was the first person to register. So I feel like it's my birthday this week, so I'm having a fantastic week because I think this has been fascinating. But I come from a slightly different perspective in that I am mostly interested in trust within the research system. So the trust that moves along from the funders through the researchers at the institutions as well, and then right down to the end with the publishing of a lot of those outputs. And when I look at things like generative AI and other AI tools, I think we've moved past even just talking about generative now. It comes back for me to thinking about the values and the principles that we have for how the research system is supposed to work. And in the UK, we have a really clear framework that sets out what those principles and values are. But there are others. Most countries, I think, have one, or ALIA has the code of practice. And when I look at those principles, they're things that have been discussed a lot already this morning. So we've talked about honesty and transparency. And I'm pulling together some of what else I've heard, which is around care and respect. And care and respect is both for your colleagues that are working in the research system and the research participants and the beneficiaries of that research. And those same things come up in a lot of public attitudes to science surveys as being the attributes that are most important for them to see in scientists. So there's a lot of consistency in what those expectations are. The pace of change with AI, though, brings questions around methodology and rigor, which need to be answered within disciplinary communities. What's going to work, what isn't. But those are happening, and they are progressing. I think one of the questions that is important for me to see asked is how do these disciplinary areas, how do they evaluate risk? How are they thinking about these new things? And for those discussions to happen, which is why trust is so important. Trust requires a bit of vulnerability of saying you don't have all the answers, which I think is what we're all up here saying and trying to have that conversation. So the end of it for me, though, with my role as a part of a funding body and working in research integrity, is to think about all the policies, the processes, the guidance that we have, how that applies in these new situations. And then how is there consistency for us as a funder with other funders? How is that consistency and guidance about the use of AI? How does that play out in the guidance that institutions have developed? And then how does that then seem through to right to the end of what is the expectation of the publishing community? Because it's not fair if we're giving different guidance and direction at different points to people in the research community. And that's where we see a lot of burden and stress come on. So that is an area where I think we can continue to work. And I'm really interested in your history of the US, because the last point for me to make is I'm American. I lived in France for a few years. I love Paris. And I've made my home in the UK for the last 20 years. Research happens in our domestic environments, but so much of it is international collaboration. And so many of the benefits extend well beyond borders. And so as we think about these things, this network, which was talked about in the last session, we do need to think about what are we building domestically, but how are we sharing that? And how are we then creating and ensuring that there's consistency between these policies, between these expectations, so that our international community is all working in the same way? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much to all presenters for their insightful comments. Basically, I think there is a general agreement among, basically, I would say the four of you about stressing the importance of participation of society at large in the process of producing science itself. Also, about the need to educate the public about what does it mean to produce science, and how is science made, and what is basically the scientific method, and basically going back to this point that was made earlier about how we have probably missed the point and not transmitted enough about the process of producing knowledge and too much about supposed truths and facts, which are maybe, of course, later on proven wrong by the very scientific method we are trying to defend here. And finally, there is a plea for linking with other sources of knowledge that may be considered legitimate, and how science should work with them more. But I would like to go back to the four of you with a question, which is basically a pessimistic one again, in the sense that we are in a world that we could define as the economy of attention, basically. We are basically just trying to keep the attention of the public in general. And the way in which the public opinion is shaped now is much more dynamic and much faster than it has ever been. Romain emphasized very clearly how after the 1940s and all the way until the 70s, science had like the dominant, legitimate narrative about what is true and what is not, right? And that was, of course, a very comfortable position. It was probably a nice moment to be a scientist, right? Now it's a totally different environment. Science now is only one source of narratives. And I would like to introduce the concept of narrative, because maybe now the importance of what is true and what is not true is probably not so central anymore. Now it's about which narrative is more dominant, which narrative is more present in the public opinion sphere. And here is where I come back with my most negative point, is in this context in which narratives are produced everywhere, more and more groups of our population cannot discriminate what is the actual, let's say, source of those narratives, or the legitimacy, or what is behind those narratives. Is simply an opinion? Is it actually an interest? What kind of interest it is? Is it an economic interest? Is it a political interest? Is it a geostrategic interest? Is it simply an interest in making money thanks to getting likes and views on a particular platform? So in this context, which I think has revolutionized the entire sphere, and with AI being able to produce narratives basically custom-made, right, for specific objectives and goals, once again, how can we make sure that people, the public, differentiate between what is knowledge, result of the scientific method, and narrative produced of a plurality of different interests? So since Wendy is a little bit disconnected from us because she's far away and online, probably I would like to give the word to her first. Thank you.
That was a very long question. I'm not quite sure what the essence of, but let me just pick up on some of the things that, you see, I think the public must be very confused because our leaders are confused. Certainly, coming back to AI, which is what I know the best. By the way, I liked, is it Roman, our history man? I very much liked your framing of the issues here. I like going back to look forward. And I'm afraid I share your pessimism about the status of universities going forward because they're expensive. And governments don't have money at the moment, and they will do anything to cut the money that they are putting towards funding science, which is expensive. I'm assuming that is a pretty universal thing. We've seen it very big time happening in the US. It's happening in my country, and I'm assuming it's happening across Europe. And part of the rhetoric there was that actually the important research happens in companies. I mean, that was certainly Trump's rhetoric, was in terms of AI, don't need universities. It's all now happening in the research labs in the big companies, and they will fund themselves to do that research because of the market. They've got to make money, and we don't need so much money going into universities. And of course, actually, the foundational research, everything about, for example, generative AI, for good or bad, came out of universities 30 or more years ago is when that work started. And when Geoffrey Hinton was doing his work back in, he moved from the UK to America and then to Canada to find the money to do his research because everyone told him it was madness and it wouldn't lead to anything. And look where we are now. And that's usually almost, but I can't think of an example in science, maybe someone can, where of course there are breakthroughs in industry, but that's at the drivers are different in industry. They're much more about what's going to be a return on our investment in a very short term to satisfy our shareholders. Whereas universities are very much about blue sky research, giving people a chance to explore ideas that may seem madness at the time or are going to lead to nowhere. And how many examples do we have where great scientific breakthroughs are made by accident because someone was exploring something else? And so this is my, and I think the public must be confused because they are being almost told by our leadership. And we've just today in the UK, they announced a big deal between Google DeepMind and our government on AI about funding a lab in the government effectively on the use of AI in public sector and other areas for support of working people, right? And it's like these are such mixed messages to produce about where. And this is at the same time when these companies are producing things that we can't trust, but we're being told that's where the money should go because that's where the trusted research is going to happen. I don't know if that answered your question, but I think it picked up a bit on what Roman said. And also the point about research integrity, universities have to hold themselves to account on that and should do, but industry doesn't in the same way.
Thank you so much, Wendy, for elaborating on the budget constraint dimension, which is of course very specific of the Western world, let's say, because we see at the same time how China is expanding its investment in science with very good criteria.
Yeah, I should have said that. Sorry. Yes, you're quite right. Yeah.
Because science is going to be the foundation of the future economic growth of China. So in that sense, that brings a very interesting dimension. So please, colleagues on the table.
Thank you very much, Francisco. I will go back to your first question. Long question, as you said. I think, first of all, we can warn citizens. When an information comes from social media, usually the purpose is to have more and more followers. So the purpose is to make information which people will engage with. And usually it comes with emotion. And usually it comes with negative emotion. So when you receive an information which makes you sad, anger, fear, usually you should have an alarm saying maybe this information is not so true and we should check. Because when you give scientific information, most of the time it's completely neutral. And that's the main difference. Well, I think this is a way to warn citizens first. The second thing is about what I said previously. 78% of the French population in a very good survey say that they cannot distinguish truth from false information. And they are worried about it. But there are so many things that they are receiving so many information every day that they cannot take the time to check if it's true or false. So how can they fight against false information and false scientific information? I think there is a new role for institutions. I think, for example, when you see on social media an information about health, again, that COVID vaccine gives cancer, which is an obvious false information, but very well deployed, I think that our institution could fight back, should fight back. And they are not doing that because our institution, university, usually are neutral. They just publish information. They don't feel that they are fighting against false information, and they don't think it's their role. And I think that really now time has changed. Most of the people don't want to trust false information, but they receive so many that they don't know, in fact. And we call that, science, social science calls that cognitive laziness. It means that they have so many things to deal with that they cannot check every information they get. So if you want to get the population aware of the truth, you have to give them as much as good information as they receive false information. That's a new task for us, for scientific institutions. And I think really with IA, since IA will keep this information from everything, we need more and more to publish and fight back all the time against what's wrong. And I think it's really an issue for many universities now, or many institutions in science. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So you are asking us to be much more proactive, actually, and pushing forward our scientific knowledge, but also I understand in a way that is can be understood and in a way combats those other narratives which are based on random ideas. Okay, thank you. Agnès, Romain?
I will make a very short answer to say that I completely agree with what has just been said. But maybe I will insist on the issue of time and narratives. I think they are crucial for today, and maybe our main problem is the issue. I agree with the issue of money, which is central, but the issue of time is also a very difficult one. I mean, we need time. I mean. That's one of the key elements of science. I mean, time to discuss between us, time to make interesting and sound proposals. So, and that's difficult in the crazy age we live in. I mean, crazy media age, which is always willing to have more and more information and to feed the beast of social media. So I think that's a very difficult element, and it should be strongly taken into account because we have seen a lot of false data and numerous problems with scholarly works. So I think we have to defend that too, and that's part of the pedagogy I mentioned, and the fact we have to teach, we have to discuss about what we are doing, and to make good science, we need a lot of time. That's we don't have to try to deal with that or to make argument with that. That's central. That's crucial. The second element is the narrative. I think we lost the narrative, and in mid-20th century, science had a wonderful narrative. I mean, it means progress for the population, and the impact is amazing. I mean, I studied the United States, but if you look at health data in the United States, that's amazing. I mean, the health revolution is incredible in the 20th century, for all the population. The working class and the elite, you have an amazing transformation of the living age of the population, and science means something very, very clear for everybody, and it means a better future for your kids, for your son, your grandson, and it's not the case today. I mean, we have more and more people who don't believe that the future is going to be brighter, that the future is going to be better, and they don't believe scientists to build a better world. So maybe that's a key element if one thinks about the narrative of science for tomorrow.
Yeah, Thank you, Roman. That raises a very interesting topic for another panel, which is how the growing perception of instabilities and vulnerabilities and uncertainties about the future are affecting precisely the receptiveness of citizens to all kinds of narratives away from the ones that produced by scientific institutions. Rebecca?
I'll be really quick because I'm not on social media, so it's not an area that I actually do much with my work either. But what we have seen on social media is that sometimes things play out on social media, which is not the right place for them to play out. So there can be arguments in the communities, there can be discussions about behavior of researchers. And I think that's a really scary thing to happen because social media seems so separated from the reality of engagement with people. But again, I'm speaking as someone who's not on social media. So it comes back to me to those things that we expect. You know, the evidence that we have tends to say that trust of researchers, particularly ones in universities, is really high. So that's a strength to build on. I'm not going pessimistic this week, I'm sorry. But I think there's so much to build on, but there has to be that consistency, there has to be that focus on that openness and that transparency. And enabling that accessibility is going to, I think, hopefully provide a focus in the future. Because as you said, if we're seeing that people want to be able to figure out what the right information is, we just have to give them the opportunities of seeing where that is. And perhaps there's a way of not each researcher having to do that themselves, which is quite difficult and time intensive, but there can be stronger messages coming from groups to say, this is what you can trust, this is why you can trust it, this is how.
Thank you, Rebecca. You raise another fundamental point, which is precisely, should we ask not only institutions, but also individual scientists themselves to be participant in this struggle? And that is probably far too much to ask to many of them. Most of them are simply not interested, not knowledgeable. They already have a lot in their plate with their own research, with fundraising, with many other things. So it's probably not normal or fair to ask them to do this, but probably if we can increase the community of scientists who is aware about this and who devote a little bit of their energy in this direction, that could probably help as well. I think it's time to open for the public now. So again, I can't see anything, but I'm sure someone with microphones can see hands raising, and we'll direct the microphones over there.
Hello, thank you. I'm Hedwig de Mulder, Professor of Language and Communication at the University in Amsterdam, Vrije Universiteit Amsterdam, I should say. I have a question about the issue of mis- and disinformation, and also about focusing, to my idea, too much on improving information. The idea that when we have more and better information transferred to the public, or when we say social media cannot be trusted, that the trust in science will become better. And I think this is the wrong direction. I think we should be much more focused on the idea of when does information land, or rather, when is information treated as information by people? And then it comes to people's values, the things they often do not articulate, but which they treat in everyday life as important. For example, what does it mean to me to be a good parent? That is a key issue in, for example, vaccination communication, where parents often say not blindly trust government or science is part of my identity of a good parent. And so it means when you are a good parent, you do not blindly trust science and government. So this often has to do not so much with understanding or not understanding information, or with trusting science or not trusting science, but whether we can attend to people's values. And the problem is, and that's why I do agree that narratives are so important. I think when I look, I study anti-vaccination groups, and they are great at producing great narratives, because at the core of their narratives is a key value. For example, what does it mean for you to be a good parent? So more and more I feel that when we want to gain trust and build trust in science, we have to go beyond science and accept that for people to accept information as being information valuable to them, we need to focus on their values. And a lot of anti-science groups are much better, or anti-science, but at least at critical groups are much better at that than we are, to speak in terms of parties. So my question is, could you reflect on that?
Yeah, thank you so much. Anybody wants to pick up the question and reply?
Thank you. So that's really interesting. And certainly as a parent, there is a moment before they're sticking needles in your children where you do think, am I doing this? Is this right? And I completely understand that, even when my kids just had vaccinations at 16 and 18. That was yellow fever. I'm just saying they did have their vaccinations, just so you know. But where I wanted to go to with this is that, for me, in the work that I do, this comes back to the system and the processes that we have in place. And some of the worries and the fears people have are born out of specific things that they have heard about where things went wrong in the research system. So the research system has to have the right robust policies and processes in place when things go wrong to be able to manage them. And that's where, for me, this comes down to, is saying, when we see that we hear about allegations of research misconduct, how are they followed up? How quickly are they dealt with? How well are they dealt with? Because it's when there are issues, and it takes a long time to see that those issues are born out of perhaps falsification, as we heard about some stories earlier this morning. But it's that, I think, that can breed some of that sentiment. So there's an opportunity as a system to make sure that those processes are really good. That would be my reflection just right away. Does anyone else?
So maybe very shortly, I think the problem is that scientists need to cooperate to find ways to explain what's going on with simple messages, and it's difficult because we are not used to do that. To take a very simple issue in France, I'm trying with other directors and presidents of universities in both social sciences and hard sciences, to explain what's going on with Trump, what's going on in Argentina, in many places. And we are looking for a way to make the general population interested with what is going on. And one issue I'm very convinced could be the best way to explain what is going on, and very, very powerful for the population, is the decision of Trump to stop funding through the National Science Foundation research on women and health, women and gender and medicine. That's very easy, and that's not only social scientists complaining about the issue of gender. That's a key element. I mean, today it's very difficult in the United States to keep on doing research, well, to have funding from the National Science Foundation on the issue of medicine and gender. I mean, people have to erase the word gender from their own research if they're working on medicine and women. And that's something very easy to promote. I mean, it could be a way to explain, and I don't know if you have heard the president of Institut Pasteur and other very famous institution of hard science, they use that argument, and it's a very strong argument. And you have scientists in the US who made the argument. I mean, the NSF's decision, which is very technical, the 200-word stories about, if you use one of these words, you won't get money. It's kind of technical. I mean, the National Science Foundation is something very technical, and the whole process is technical. But here, I mean, one scientist says that Trump's decision is going to kill the lives of women, and that's true. I mean, we will have less research on medicine and gender in the US today than we used to have in the past because of the Trump's decision. So I agree with you. We need to find messages beyond science, messages beyond the NSF, and I'm sure nobody cares in France about the NSF decision. I mean, or what's going to happen after that. But if you take the issue of women in medicine, I mean, your sisters, your mothers, your grandmothers, that's very concrete. I mean, it's not only the decision made in a huge, big institution. It's the lives of a lot of women, and that's very, very scary.
Thank you. I just want to add something very short. I think this is the reason why social science is so important in science. When we speak about science, we need social science a lot. And really, thank you for inviting such institution as the one you are running. I think it's very, very important. When we speak about science, we speak about population, we speak about culture, we speak about many things that social science deals with.
Excellent, thank you. We have at least 2 questions over there, and there is one in the back. So let's collect them, and then the panel can answer.
Hi, thanks. Sean Sepkari, Luxembourg National Research Fund. I'll try for a short question. I'm stuck on the focus of narratives and the overload of information the public is getting, but should we be trying to control the narrative? Should we be hiring and mobilizing a massive army of comms experts to help really control the narrative and make sure that what is public facing is the truth, or at least the scientific method, and what comes out? What are your opinions on that?
Yes, to your left, someone was just also, yes.
Thanks, Joran Bellengren from the OECD. So you're talking about the crisis of trust in science, but the scientific enterprise is more and more also losing trust in its scientific partners. So about foreign interference, IP leakage, knowledge leakage, and so on. So do you think this entire new discourse of losing maybe trust in some formally trusted scientific partners, will this lead to less trust in science or more trust in science because now funding agencies, governments, etc., put more stringent risk assessment and risk mitigation measures in place to ensure there is trusted collaborations, international scientific collaborations in place?
Excellent, thank you. A few lines in the back, there was another question who wanted to be posed.
Hi, my name is Catherine Saraco. I'm representing UDIS, which gathers the interests and values of 13 research-intensive universities in France. My question goes to Romain Huret. Thank you first for bringing the historical perspective to the front. It was very interesting. I just wanted to pick up on what you said at the end of your presentation regarding the role of universities moving forward. So you were not very optimistic. And you said that it would be important to ensure that universities are working more closely with big tech. Could you elaborate a little bit on that?
Okay, I think we're going to try to answer those 3 questions.
Can I say something, maybe?
Wendy, please go. Yes, please.
Wendy,
you start.
Just too quick. I mean, I was just struck with the question about controlling the dialogue. I don't know if you said controlling, but managing the dialogue. And it's getting very confusing because of the role of governments in all this. And that's always been the case. But I mean, at the moment, I'm just thinking of, say, climate change and what's happening with the COP conferences. And there's so much, whatever the what the scientists say, there's a lot of politicians, including the leader of the free world, who say there's no evidence for their claims. And the other side of that is that even if the politicians follow. I mean, this happened in COVID, all sorts of problems. We lost trust in COVID because we didn't know how to handle it. But going back to climate change, like our politicians in the UK, we have a net zero policy, but that's costing us a lot of money. Right? It's expensive. Now, you can argue morally, we have to pay that price because we've benefited. And you know, from the use of oil and gas, and we need to get the balance back. But when people are seeing their cost of living going up, they can't afford to heat their houses, there's huge resistance to the increasing cost that the net zero policy is producing. So they will question, you know, that when they hear Trump say, well, the scientists, there's no evidence to prove that they're right, or we don't know they're right, I think it's all a scam, people will believe him because they want to. Because that suits, that helps in terms of trying to say to the politicians, we don't want to pay for this, we don't want to pay for net zero. And it's got so complicated and so wrapped up in politics. I find it hard to get through that. I don't know what the others think.
Thank you, Wendy. Romain? Deactivate it from...
Yes, very shortly on the your question. Yes, of course, we have to work with big tech companies, and in a way, universities work with corporations in 20th century, for instance, in the United States. I mean, I mentioned that, the great narrative about the United States, but the narrative was an amazing collaboration between corporations, universities, and the federal government. I mean, that's what, and the golden age of science and the golden age of expertise after World War II was the golden age of this collaboration. You have the three actors, and but what was crucial at the time was scientists made a decision. I mean, they were at the forefront. Okay, and if you look at the Manhattan Project, for instance, it was presented and it was made by scientists, and whatever you think of this project, but it was used after World War II as a kind of projects we have to deal with. And there were a lot of Manhattan projects on every issues after World War II, on cancer, health issues, traffic congestion. Everywhere in the country in 1950s, 1960s, you have small and big science projects. And it was all the time collaboration between the federal government, the NSF, the universities, and research departments, and corporations. So I don't see how today we can work without corporations and without the federal government. But what we lost today is the battle of publicity and decision making. I mean, we are not first. I mean, and if you look at space research in the United States, I mean, the federal government and universities are largely overlooked by private corporations.
I would like to stress that our debate today is not new. It used to be the same a few centuries ago. I would like to quote Marcel Proust, a very well-known French writer of the 20th century. Marcel Proust was saying, "Facts do not penetrate the world where our beliefs live." I love this sentence. What changed is the method, the social media. We are dealing with something new, IA, but the questioning of facts between beliefs was always true in the world. So now we have to find new methods, a new way to fight back beliefs and stress facts.
Excellent. Just be going. That would.
Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. So unsurprisingly, I do think that... No, you can't. Can you hear me now? Yeah, you can hear me now. Okay. So unsurprisingly, I do think that research funders should make themselves available. Obviously, I'm here. But I think that goes both ways. So I'm often surprised to hear about research that is interesting for my work that never makes it across my desk. And I did a webinar last week where a number of our grant holders were doing really interesting work related to the integrity of the research system, and I knew about none of it. And so it's definitely on me to get out there and to talk to people and to meet people, but there's something that needs to change about understanding the audience for the research sometimes as well, and acknowledging that the research could be really helpful to those that are making the policy. And it's that link that I am really interested in, to make sure that more of that is coming across my desk, because I can look for it, but some of it's going to be really hard for me to find.
Excellent. So I think with this, we're going to wrap it up and encourage everybody to go for lunch and keep the conversation going over there. So join me in thanking the members of the panel for their excellent participation.
Thank you.